over a cardboard sea. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in
Welcome
me.
back to another edition of Rare Delicacies. For today's edition, we want to focus on the movies that, for one reason or another, always wind up getting stuck in the vaults and even forgotten for an extended period of time. Sometimes they're movies that may have gotten caught up in a bit of a regime change. Either the studio went bankrupt, or sometimes the CEOs change, and they decide to just hide away all the movies from the previous regime. These are movies such as Baron Munchausen, or even Cabin in the Woods. Alternatively, however, there are the films that the studios had absolutely no faith in whatsoever, whether it be because they just didn't get it, or because it tested poorly in test screenings. So they decided to just hide the movie away and not really give it a second thought until the time comes when they're like, oh, we have nothing for this particular week. Well, we got that. Just release it then. Just don't do any press screenings. There. Fun! Now, for reasons unknown, this film wound up getting caught in some kind of void and disappeared and didn't really see the light of day. And even then, when it finally even saw the slightest sliver of a light, it was merely on television in Europe. And when it finally showed up in America, it showed up on this little show on Turner Classic Movies. That's how rare this particular movie is. And this film comes to us from our good friends at the Review and Brew. Say hello, gentlemen!
What's poppin', homie?
It's good to be here. Thanks for having us on your show.
So what is the name of this film you have brought unto us?
We have a treat. It's a great film. What's it called?
It's Nothing Lasts Forever. It's a lost film from 1984 that never actually had a VHS release, a DVD release, or a Blu-ray release. So this is truly a rare delicacy.
So what motivated you to bring this one to us?
Well, Kay and I actually have an art background. So we could definitely relate to the struggle of the main character. And seeing the struggle of trying to survive as an artist, like nobody accepts you unless you already are an established artist.
Right.
And they expect you to take on these small jobs like our main character has.
Yeah, he works looking at cars in one of the New York tunnels.
For Dan Aykroyd.
For Dan Aykroyd. And, I mean, I worked at a gas station. I've worked retail. Who hasn't? And, you know, it's just kind of a sad environment for the main character. He has a crap job because he wants to be an artist.
Well, one can definitely sympathize with any aspiring artist. For all of us, especially us YouTubers, we graduated high school with the full intention of succeeding in a particular art form, only to find ourselves working in retail. Blockbuster, we miss you! And spent our years wondering when the time came when we were going to get noticed. We can all feel that way.
I'd never seen this film until you recommended it, so I don't know. How do you find it?
I actually read about it in this book called Films That You Will Never See. So I took that as a challenge, and here we are. It's easy to see why this film was never released. It's a very haphazard movie. It almost feels like if you took Brazil and Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and meshed them together.
It's a very bizarre film. It doesn't really flow in the conventional sense. Like if you go to the movie theater, you see a movie, it's got plot, 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 the end. This movie jumps around, but still follows a cohesive plot, but it's very winding. And it's also funny. You have like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, like you said. That's a very, very funny film. And this movie has those elements of comedy, but it's not as obvious. It's more subtle.
It's very dry.
Gentlemen, you have piqued my curiosity, and I sincerely hope for the rest of you, your curiosity is piqued as well. So, I will not delay you any further. This is Nothing Lasts Forever.
Yes, it's only a canvas sky hanging over a muslin tree. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Without your love, it's a honky-tonk.
My first impressions of this film when I started watching it has something of a surrealist quality, even to a level of absurdity. The film makes it abundantly clear, pretty much from the beginning, that this is not meant to be taken into any kind of actual legitimate recreation of a bygone age. This is definitely set in its own sphere of reality. And all that definitely helps, especially when you hit some of the more outrageous elements of this film. I'm noticing a very strong satirical slant in this film, particularly in the way it portrays how the establishment likes to stifle creative inspiration. When you see the world as it's portrayed here, it's very stifling, it's very restrictive, and it's almost choking. You see the main character and he's hell-bent to find some way to express his inner soul, but in a world that seems to want to beat that down and rein it in with rules, regulations, you can see the frustration writ large upon his face. And I definitely gotta say, Zach Galligan really nails the innocent, wide-eyed youth. But this character here seems more of a caricature of those type of character tropes of the all-American boy. Here's someone who has a sincere innocence about him. And it's very endearing, and it really fits with the world that's being portrayed in this film.
One aspect of this film that we thought was really cool was you have Lauren Tom, who's the voice actress who plays Amy Wong in Futurama. And you could definitely pick out elements where Futurama has kind of reused some of these ideas.
Right. I'm very familiar with Futurama, and some of the plot elements for this film, I was like, man, where have I seen that? Futurama, you have the commercialist moon, which is, I think, the second episode of Futurama. It's all about how the moon is just this giant commercial dump. And then you have one of the movies where Fry, the main character of Futurama, meets these hobos who run this underground sect, which is a huge part of this film. And I feel like the writers of Futurama had to have seen this film because there are just so many similarities, and it's really fun to watch.
I could definitely see how the test audiences may have been turned off by this because it does fly off the rails at particular points. It gets incredibly surreal. Even before he gets on the bus heading off to the moon. Yeah, you heard me right. There's a point in the film where he actually gets on a bus to go to the moon. That's the kind of film this is. It has absolutely no problem being fanciful. The film is very dreamlike. That's the first impression I got walking through. This is a very exaggerated reality. This is the kind of place where artistic merit is tested within a confined limit, and even then done so in a very garish and very forceful and very uncomfortable way. And seeing as this film was directed by Tom Schiller and produced by Lorne Michaels and even features Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray, you definitely have to give them a lot of credit for imagination, and not just that, to tell a very fanciful story, but in an old style aesthetic. You would safely slot this film in right next to stuff like, say, Black Dynamite, Far From Heaven, or The Hudsucker Proxy, except this one I feel is more finely detailed. This film looks like it could be out of the 1930s. The detail on it is incredible.
I didn't really understand the black and white to color. I assume it's kind of like the fantasy outside of the realm of commercialist America. What did you think of the color in this film? Because I really didn't get it.
The thing I noticed about those color transitions is that they always seem to happen whenever Adam felt in any shape or form inspired, or he felt some semblance of release from his very restrictive reality. Like he's seeing something new and outrageous and things that are so chaotic that it's almost like freedom to him and he comes alive. So I didn't really find the transitions to color particularly jarring. It said to me that the character was experiencing inspiration, genuine inspiration, and all he really has to do is just let loose, cut himself off from the establishment and just throw himself into something new and unexpected. And as a result, he finds himself to be electrified for the first time in his life to create. And that's what I got out of it.
Were there any moments when you were watching this that you felt like, weird?
I gotta say, one of the things that tickled me was when they arrive on the moon and they're greeted by this Hawaiian hula greeting party. I was like going, did Luc Besson see this and take inspiration from it for The Fifth Element, for Lost in Paradise? That was my thought going in. That was one of the things that got me giggling pretty much.
We found a lot of elements in this movie which we both admired for being outside of the film itself.
Normally on our show, we pick out a beer to go along with the film, and we see that you've decided to do kind of the same thing. What did you pick out?
Well, normally I'm not a beer drinker or much in the way of ales. I'm definitely more of a cider drinker. And since this film opts to tell a very fanciful story, utilizing very old school techniques, I decided let's have a cider that has a very new type of flavor, but nevertheless presents itself in a very old-fashioned style. Of course, I present Gumption. The name actually derives from P.T. Barnum, the guy who was very accurately portrayed in The Greatest Showman. And according to him, cider spirits back during his time were called gumption. There you go. That's where it gets its namesake. It's a simple combination of common eating apples and dry cider apples. As simple as the combination is, there is a nice combination of the old and the new about it. There's definitely something fresh, but yet there's something old about it at the same time. It's kind of a nice blended flavor to it. I am no expert, but nevertheless, that is why I definitely think this is a very good cider.
We looked really hard to try and find the gumption cider that you recommended. I've had it before, but we could not find it for the life of us. So we saw, okay, this movie's got space in it. Let's go with this beer.
Space Dust by Elysian. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, I'll give it a go. Charles.
To Narcotic Casserole for having us on your show. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
It's got a lot of fruity aroma to it.
And the flavor has a lot of fruit as well. I definitely get like stone fruit. You have apricot and lychee.
Yeah, I definitely get the lychee.
It's not a super bitter beer, even though there's a lot of hops in there, absolutely. And it's very, very fresh tasting. The last time I had this in bottle, it didn't taste at all like this, so you might want to check the date if you're buying this. But if you get a fresh bottle, definitely go for it.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have the obtrusive bitterness that usually turns me off when it comes to most beers. Even the hops aren't as overbearing as most other times. A very appropriate choice for a very interesting film that you guys have given us for Rare Delicacies.
So thanks again for having us on your show, and see you later.
So for this edition of Rare Delicacies, this film is truly one of the reasons this show was made. Movies like this hit home our mission of trying to get these obscure movies brought out to the light of day and hopefully generate some kind of demand that they get something resembling a home video release. If you can get a chance to see this film, if you can find any means possible to see it, I definitely recommend it, because the more people that demand to see this film, the more likely they can try to cut through the red tape and maybe even potentially get it released on home video. Guys at the Review and Brew, thank you very much for this film. I strongly recommend you like, share, and subscribe to their channel, The Review and Brew. They review movies, and they even give you a lovely little pairing to go with it. And so for I myself here at Narcotic Casserole, this film is on the menu, with a little on the side.
Love, it's a melody played in a penny arcade. It's a Barnum and Bailey world.